This is Bryce from Red Monster Gaming to show off my new adjustable height gaming desk. The desk is built on the Vivo adjustable height steel base, which I've linked below. This is a unique referral code that helps support the channel. I purchased the base on Amazon for just $225. It has an adjustable width base, as you can see here, which supports up to a 7.5 foot length. I chose the manual crank version, but there is a motorized version available for about $275 for those interested. The feet unscrew from the base, so it's easy to replace with rolling casters. And assembly took a total of maybe 15 minutes, only requires an Allen wrench that they've included, as well as a screwdriver. I'm really happy with the desk quality. The base feels really solid once it's fully assembled, and it seems to support a good amount of weight. I've got no concerns that should be able to handle my home office and gaming setup. For the surface, I decided to go with a 3/4 inch plywood with a birch veneer. The result should be a nice, natural looking wood grain that I'm not worried about scuffing up under normal office use. I started by cleaning up the rough edges on the back side of the desk. The saws at Home Depot didn't seem to like the plywood. Next, I applied an iron-on birch edging tape, starting on the shorter ends, which I sanded flush with the front and back edges. Then I applied the edging tape to the front and back edges for a full perimeter coverage. This should look a lot better than the bare plywood edge, especially after finishing. When applying the edging tape, leave some extra on each edge to ensure you have full coverage. After it's set, trim the excess with scissors or a razor blade, then sand it flush with some 220 grit sandpaper. Don't forget to do a final pass with the sandpaper with the grain of the wood. The iron-on edging tape was fairly easy to work with. It has a heat-activated glue that sets in under a minute. Before it dries, use a 2x4 block and apply pressure to the edging tape to make sure the glue gets into any rough spots that can help it adhere. The edging tape is slightly wider than 3/4 inch to provide full coverage. This leaves a slight lip that needs to be trimmed off. I found it was pretty easy to go back over each edge and sand it flush. With the edging tape in place, go back in and fill any chipped areas with wood filler. This will ensure you have a smooth top and bottom surface. After the putty dries, use 220 grit sandpaper and sand it flush with the surface, making sure to do a final pass with the grain of the wood to avoid unsightly scratches. Now I line up the reinforcing pieces. I start with 2 mounting locations for the desk base and check that the width matches up with the mounting brackets. I mark the measurements on the underside of the desk once I've got everything at a comfortable working height, marking the outside edges to line up the mounting pieces. Using some small pieces of scrap wood and hand grips, I make guides to line everything up. Then I apply a healthy layer of wood glue to the back of the mounting piece. With the glue evenly distributed, I put the piece into place and drill 4 countersink holes on the outside corners, which I then secure with 1-inch screws. I finished this side up with 4 additional 1-inch countersunk screws. I repeat this process for the other side. Next, I attach the wide reinforcement piece using the same guide and glue method. This reinforcement piece will sit directly below my monitors and should help prevent any bowing from the weight. I secure each end with a few screws. Then I remove the guides, and then add screws spaced out across the entire span of the reinforcing plate. Once everything is secured into place, I do a quick pass with some 220 grit sandpaper to clean up any rough spots. With the glue dried, I do a pass over the entire surface area with 220 grit sandpaper again to prepare it for finishing. Make sure to sand down all of the surface areas to get a nice end result. The next morning, I was ready for finishes. I started by wiping everything clean with a tack cloth. With the surface cleaned thoroughly, I started my first coat of polyurethane in a matte finish. I decided against staining since I like the natural wood look. When applying the polyurethane, be sure to use long brush strokes with the grain of the wood. Applying thinner layers speeds up drying time, but may require an extra coat or two. I let the first top coating dry, then I applied a coating to the underside of the desk. I don't need it to be as scratch resistant as the top surface, but a few coats will help seal everything in. With both sides dried, I sanded down the entire surface with 220 grit sandpaper to smooth out any roughness. Sanding the polyurethane creates a lot of dust, so it's important to wipe everything down again. In hindsight, I should have used a vacuum first. With the first coat dried and sanded, I started in on my second coating. I'm going to repeat this process for a total of 4 coats, letting each one dry for 3 to 4 hours in between. Now I mount the surface to the desk base. I start by drilling a few pilot holes and then securing it with the mounting screws, repeating the process on the opposite side. Once the surface is secured, I attach the hand crank mounting bracket. I first get the length of the connection rod set, then grip the plastic mounting bracket to the desk surface while I get the screws in. The finished surface dimensions were 66 inches across by 30 inches deep. I spent a total of about $290 on the project, $225 for the base, $50 for the wood surface, and another $15 for the polyurethane finish.